Just watch me now.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podollan, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podollan, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to Up My Hockey with Jason Podollan for episode number 39. I am your host, Jason Podollan, and today it sounds strange, but I also happen to be the guest. I'm going to tell you how this went about, and it's a little bit odd and it's a little bit strange, but it actually works. So I'm fighting through my aversion to doing this, and I'm going to release it, and I'm going to tell you why. There's been a few of you over the past weeks and months that have reached out over text, direct message, whatever social media, to say that they really appreciate what I'm doing, love the stories, but would like to hear my story and would like to hear, my my ups and downs and my draft day and, me in the minors. And although I was, honored and grateful that people would want to listen, I really had no idea how that was going to happen, because there was no chance I was going to sit in front of a computer screen or a microphone and talk for an hour to myself. That I just didn't understand how that would work. Plus, I felt that there were so many other great people out here with awesome stories that I wanted to share and be a part of the interview. So I kind of never really gave it any serious consideration. However, there is a gentleman by the name of Konarowski, and he had a podcast called Jersey Stories. Why I say had is because he was forced to stop doing the podcast because his employer felt that there was a conflict of interest between his podcast and his job. I don't know why or how or what the reasons were for that, but before he could release the episode that we did together, he was asked to stop doing his podcast. So now we had this podcast with him and I that was never going to be heard. And he was proud of the interview. I was proud of the interview. I thought that he did a really great job running it. And we kind of had the idea of, well, maybe this is how my listeners get to hear about me, is that, you interviewing me, but we'll have it be an Up My Hockey episode. So that's how this all happened. We had a podcast in the can that told my story, and also happens to tell 3 funny, memorable stories from me at the end of the podcast, which was essentially the idea or the difference maker kind of behind his podcast, that he was interviewing ex-pros or people in the game, current NHLers, and having them talk about their 3 favorite memories or 3 favorite pieces of sports memorabilia that they collected. So we get into those stories at the end. But I have to be honest with you. I mean, I definitely fought through the urge not to do it, because there was a big part of me that didn't want me to be on here. I didn't want to feel that it was about me, or that I felt that my story was important, or I didn't want you to think that I was being pretentious or narcissistic or any of these things. But at the end of the day, I think the truth of the matter is that why you are actually listening to me on this show right now, and why you've tuned in previously, is because of my stories. I mean, if those things that I'm going to share here in this episode never happened to me, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. Up My Hockey wouldn't exist. So as far as from a genesis standpoint of this company and this podcast and what I'm doing now in the world of hockey and athletics, it has relevance. And I think I have to be honest with that it's a big piece of this story. And for those of you interested, I think it's time to share it. And because there's a great way for me to share it. Like I said, it's already been done. There's nothing I had to do with it. I'd already done the work, and we just had to produce it as an episode of Up My Hockey. So we're going to release it here as episode number 39. I hope you find it interesting. I hope you find some lessons in it. And without further ado, I bring you the episode hosted by Konarowski with me, Jason Podollan. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome back, episode number 6 of Jersey Stories, and we're here with former Toronto Maple Leaf and St. John's Maple Leaf, Jason Podollan. Jason, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Hey, Nick, man, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's pretty neat that we were able to kind of have chats like this in this day and age, considering we live across the country from each other and working out time zone differences and stuff like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about your time with the Leafs, talk about your time with St. John's, and talk about your new series too that's been going on for a little while, Up My Hockey. But first of all, let's talk about just hockey in general, and something we ask all of our guests right off the bat. How'd you get into the sport?
That's a great question. I'm not really sure if like my memory doesn't serve me, as far as when my first time on skates was. It's more what my mom and dad said. And I think that they had me out there really young, like pre kind of 5 years old, maybe around 3. And I wasn't having it. I stormed off the ice, and I guess they brought me back at around 5 or 6, I think around 5. And I liked it. That was when I fell in love too with the Canucks that winter with their Stanley Cup run. So I wasn't a very good skater by all accounts. I guess who is when they start, but I would drag myself down the edge of the boards, I guess, and stand in front of the net and pretend to be a goalie because I couldn't skate. So that was my introduction at an early age, and yeah, I fell in love with the Canucks and hockey in general. And I think from there it was just sort of what we did in the summer. I mean, in the winter.
So it was that 82 Cup run though you're talking about against the Islanders there that really captured you as a Canucks fan, right?
Yeah, and as a hockey fan, I think in general, there was 2 channels I think in our house growing up, right? And one was CBC, and so Hockey Night in Canada was the thing, and during the playoffs, I mean, I guess a lot of Canadian families, we were watching hockey. My dad I think liked it. My mom was also a fan, and yeah, we being from BC, we saw that flying V, right, going a long way, and I fell in love with Tiger Williams was my guy, and a couple other guys, and King Richard was hard not to like. And yeah, I was 6. I just sat in front of the TV and just sort of really fell in love with the sport. I think at that age, at 6, it was I remember a lot of those games, and I remember kind of living and dying with them. So that was a fun introduction.
So did your mom and dad, did they latch on to the Canucks when they came into the league in 1970? Was there kind of immediate love affair to finally have an NHL team nearby?
Well, they were both from the prairies originally. My mom was from Alberta, and my dad was from Regina, or not really Regina, but a small town in Saskatchewan that was relatively close. And so I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask them that question. I mean, they were in BC and doing their thing, and raising a young guy and trying to make ends meet. And I think that I'm sure they probably fell in love with him along with the rest of the province.
Yeah, and fans out in BC wanted a team for so long, and then there's so many neat personalities that ended up coming on with those Canucks teams in the 70s and 80s. You mentioned Tiger Williams, King Richard Brodeur, and not only did they have interesting personalities, but interesting jerseys as well, because you had the blue and green scheme of the early on with the stick. You had the flying V, then the flying skate with the kind of same color scheme as the flying V. What's your favorite Canucks jersey though of all time?
That's a great question. I kind of like I like the skate kind of.
Yeah.
I didn't mind that jersey at all. I like that color combination because it was true to what I grew up with the V. I don't think anyone. Yeah. I do have a V jersey that one of my younger sons still wears that I wore kind of through that run. So a completely authentic scenario. So I mean, I like it for that reason. But I think that evolution into that next step was keeping that yellow and that gold and red and orange kind of combo and black. I thought I kind of like that, but I mean, I think they look good now. I mean, they've evolved, but they've definitely been all over the map, haven't they?
They really have. And I'm a sucker kind of for alternate those third jerseys in the mid 90s. There were some weird ones. And I think one of my favorites is that Vancouver one where it's the flying skate and it's like the diagonal where it's got the red on top and the black on the bottom. Some people kind of iffy about it, but I love it. I think it's one of my favorites. But then again, I love all sorts of jerseys. Kind of the more random they are, the more I love them. But so you end up as a little guy. You don't end up liking hockey your first time, but you get into it. And like, how did that kind of evolve? Where to the point where you're, one of the top scorers in the WHL with Spokane. How did that kind of go through from the ages of 5 to your teen years?
Well, I mean, I think I was a pretty good athlete. I mean, I guess so. Once I got it, like once you get it and you get through that learning curve and that comfort zone, I ended up being good at it. So you mean once you get good at it and then you also have a passion for it, those two things kind of go hand in hand quite nicely. So by the time I was, 8, I was probably starting to separate myself a little bit, at least in the local community, playing up a league and levels and, performing with kids 2 years older than you and that type of stuff. So that was when it was like, I could realize myself on a personal level that, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and I really like this, and this is something that I want to do. So from there, it was just kind of the progression. I kept developing relatively fast. I also grew fast. So I was a kid that got bigger quicker. So obviously minor hockey, that definitely helps. I had a physical advantage and kind of a skill advantage. So yeah, I was one of those guys that you were reading about in the paper when they were 13 years old, scoring all kinds of goals, and was going to be the next kind of greatest thing, and yeah, so that was kind of the journey for me. I got listed by Spokane at 13 years old. That was before they had the WHL draft. The WHL draft came in like just after, kind of for my age group. And so I was one of the last 3 guys to be listed as a 13-year-old on my birthday. And so there's me, Jeff Friesen, and Travis Clayton was the other guy that were listed before that came into play. So we weren't a part of that first draft that came in. And yeah, I was going to be a Spokane Chief. I was jacked to be with them. So from like 13, I couldn't play with them until I was 16. So I had 3 years to kind of dream about that and think about that. And yeah, I ended up, my travels took me out to Penticton to play with the Panthers and Paul Correa. Before that, I was in Sherwood Park. We left Vernon and went to Sherwood Park to play in that amazing Bantam League out there with the Sherwood Park Flyers. I think there was 5 NHL players that came out of that team that I played on. A lot of friendships from that team still. And, and then the year after I ended up playing in Spokane for 4 years. And it was just kind of really sort of at that point, it was kind of all part of the plan, everything was just sort of falling into place. And, me being in that league at 16 was kind of what I was told I was supposed to do, and is what I did. And, and the success that I had there, and playing on the national team and stuff was under 17. And then in the World Juniors, it was, that was kind of the thing, it was, I didn't really run into big obstacles until pro and the NHL level of like, trying to get through that door. But the early youth years were lots of goals and lots of wins and lots of fun.
When you're around that age of 12, 13, and you said you started hearing, and reading your name in the paper and stuff like that, and you've got, you had a significant amount of time between the time when you were first listed by the Chiefs and by the time you first started playing, how did you, and I guess this is good advice for younger players, how did you kind of keep a level head and not let that, hey, check that out, that's me, that's my name in the paper, I could kind of be like a hockey celebrity one day. How do you stay level headed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I did. I was definitely, I had some swagger to me. Some people maybe say I was cocky. It depends on who you would ask probably. But I was a confident kid growing up for sure. Like when it came to hockey, I was confident. When it came to, school, I was confident. So, success kind of breeds that a little bit. Now I understand more so like how valuable being humble and grateful is, like those two things. Humility is an amazing trait for anybody. And having those conversations and practicing that, on the daily is, are 2 key components. Because it's also going to make you better, right? The more humble and the more humility you have, the more you're going to practice, the more you're going to understand that there's room to grow. So yeah, from that perspective, I was just a teenage kid doing my thing, like I wasn't, I think just my personality, I didn't get too high, too low. I think that was part of the DNA that you sort of had to have at that time. There wasn't many people talking to you or, talking about mental health or worried if you were sitting on the bench or whatever. Like you had to deal with that stuff on your own. And I think the personality types that were really roller coaster didn't do well in that environment. So I think I was naturally disposed kind of to be able to handle that relatively well. But there was definitely more I could have done. Like I said, with that idea of like just really being grateful and authentically appreciative of what opportunities you have, what's in front of you, how you got to where you were, that type of stuff. And, again, this is being spoken by a 44-year-old man. It's tough to do those things on your own when you're 16, 17 years old.
Do you find, because, you have a couple of younger guys growing up and playing the game right now, but do you find just kind of being still around the game with younger individuals. Do you find that it's a little bit better now in terms of helping them through the psychological aspect of the game?
I mean, I think that's where the game's heading. I mean, it all depends on who's behind your bench, right? Or what organization you're in or association for that matter. You know, I know that's one of my biggest things is like understanding the person behind the player is what I say a lot, you know, but
That's
back
huge.
in the day, it was just all about the player, right? And I think the person is a massively big component to that because you need to develop that trust and that understanding within that player, whether they're 8 years old or whether they're 18 years old or 28 years old, you know, and I think that's where the coaches that are really getting it and being successful right now. I think those are the ones that are incorporating that type of aspect. You know, what is this human being all about? What makes them tick? How do I get the most out of them in a high performance level on the ice by talking about things away from the rink? I mean, life skills, you know, character traits, these types of things that can really, you know, open up that individual for maybe performance measures or levels that they weren't aware they were capable of.
And I say that's key too for fans because they see player on the television. I've said this before in past episodes. They see whoever that player is, player A, and that's it. They just see that person on TV. They don't really get to understand a lot about who that player really is. So I think that's a key aspect too for a fan to understand that there's still a person behind that player. So when it came time to get drafted, what was it like, the conversations that you had with teams? Because I know they go real in depth when you're about to get drafted. What was it like in 1994 in that spring when you were about to get drafted? What was that like when you were talking to teams, or did you only talk to the Maple Leafs?
No, I mean, I got drafted by Florida, right? So I mean,
Right.
I chatted with them. My draft was in Hartford, so even leading up to that draft, we still had the NHL Combine, I guess it was called. So we'd go for central scouting testing. Can't even remember where mine was, to be honest. But I mean, even previous to that, like flowing out to San Jose, flowing out to Washington, flowing out to Tampa. I think like it was kind of a blur. I mean, like really, like there was so much going on. You know, being a potential first rounder, you know, a lot of people had a lot of questions, and plus my draft year. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but my draft year was pretty tumultuous. Like it wasn't really what I had in mind for a draft year, and because of the maybe not the huge success. I still had a 30-goal season, right? But it wasn't a 50-goal season, which I think what most people were thinking they were going to get out of me. So then there was like question marks on that. So I think there was a kind of a little bit of a spotlight on me with, you know, what happened, what's the reason, you know, is he spoiled? Is he uncoachable? Was it a bad situation with the coach? You know what I mean? Like whatever that case may be, I think people were trying to figure out what that was. And then when we were in Hartford, yeah, I mean, all the teams, yeah, they set them up with your agent. I mean, I don't know how many teams I met with. It was almost all of them, though. I think like probably between 15 and 25 probably meetings, if I remember correctly. And you just go around, and yeah, those are really crazy. I mean, for the kids that are stepping into that, it's a pretty big deal because you're 18 years old. You're sitting in front of a group of men, sometimes like a big group of men, you know, and you're sitting in the middle of the circle and they're firing questions at you. And a lot of times it's not a friendly environment. It's a pretty hostile place. It can be, right? So they're putting you on the spot and they want to see what you're made out of. And, you know, and again, and I guess rightfully so, but I mean, you don't have your agent in there. It's not like you have a lawyer or your dad or your mom or anybody, right? You're in there alone. And like I said, sometimes it's a group of guys, sometimes it's the GM, sometimes it's you know, their head scout, like whatever the case may be. So I went through the ringer with that, and I could instantly tell, like, getting a little historical on my own career, but there was my coach, my drafter was Brian Maxwell, and he was a pretty divisive figure in and of himself, and had kind of a loyal following and also some really loyal critics as well, right? So
Yeah.
his critics were much warmer meetings for me, right? And I could tell who that was instantly, and his loyal followers were really critical of me in the meeting. So there was a interesting divide when it came to the meeting time. But you know, fast forward to your question about the Leafs, which is probably interesting for your listeners, is my last meeting of the entire draft was with Toronto. And again, you don't know what you're walking into, right? When you have it's like you're meeting at 3:30 at room whatever, and you show up at the hotel.
It's almost like a blind date, right?
Yeah, 100% it is. Yeah, you don't know what it is you're getting into. Whether they like you, they don't like you, how many people are in there, and this one happened to be just Cliff Fletcher, and it happened to be it seemed like his personal hotel room. which kind of almost sounds a little creepy in a way. But, and I'm sure they wouldn't do that now, you know, just for optics. But I mean, I think it was his hotel room, and it was him, and it was just me. Shook my hand, like, you know, anyone who's you know, a Leaf fan knows what Cliff was like. He was, you know, super warm and, you know, inviting and engaging, and almost like you know, like a grandfather almost. Like he was just, it was just kind of had that energy about. Yeah, he really made me feel comfortable, and just asked me how my experience had been so far. Briefly asked me about the season, and again, this was the first time that I was like a one-on-one with the GM. Like some of those meetings, sometimes the GMs aren't even in there, you know, in some scenarios, and so it was just him, no scouts, no nothing. And he ended up cutting. He goes, "Jason, I'm going to cut to the chase. We're going to take you with our first pick tomorrow." And then he also went on to say, he's like, "We draft, I think it was 18 or something." He said, "We drafted 18. We don't think we're going to get you there. So I'm going to make a trade early. We're going to trade up, and we're going to make sure that you're wearing a Maple Leaf sweater tomorrow. And, you know, congratulations," essentially. Right. And I was like,
yeah, like, holy crap.
No, yeah. Blown away. Right. Absolutely blown away. I came out, I told Mike Barnett, who was my agent at the time, you know, kind of what was said. And he's like, "Holy shit," you know, like he actually told you that. And I was like, "Yeah, man." And so it was like really wild. And it was like an awesome way to finish those meetings off. Cause like I said, some of them were good. Some of them weren't so good. You know, sometimes you leave defeated. And anyway, so this amazing guy by the name of Cliff Fletcher, who happened to be the GM of an original 6 team, told me that I was his guy, and I was going to be a first rounder. And I went to bed that night real happy. And then the next day, draft time came around, and everything was coming as planned. Toronto, well, maybe they made that big deal at the start of the day. That Sundin Clark deal, which was huge. And then they ended up trading up to get number 10, which was, you know, now I'm losing my mind, because I'm like, oh my God, even after that year, I'm going to be a top 10 pick, right? Like super great. They ended up making another trade to 15. And then they go up. Well, actually, it sounds like almost too real, but like it legitimately happened that, you know, they have the microphones on the table, the draft table, like, and they do their talking or whatever. So we're in this arena that's like, I don't know if it was sold out, but there's people everywhere, and it's bustling, and it's Toronto's pick. They just made it the trade, and they're taking like their sweet time. Like it's taking a while for them to go up to the podium, and their microphone clicks off like inadvertently at some point, and my name for like the second and a half that the microphone is on gets said over the loudspeaker, Jason Podollan, right? And so like my agent looks at me and like hits me in the leg, and so now we're like, I mean, even more convinced that like I'm getting drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? Anyway, so Cliff walks up there with his group, and they said they select Eric Fichaud from the Frontenacs or wherever he was from, and my heart just sank, right? Because I mean, well, why wouldn't it? I mean, I was supposed to go there. He told me to my face he was going to take me. Everything had happened up to that point except my name being called over the microphone. And anyway, so it was a long ride from like whenever that was, 15 to 31 when I got taken. You know, it was maybe a couple hours, seemed like 20 days for me at that space. And anyways, obviously got taken by Florida, and, you know, looking back, of course, grateful, and what is still an amazing thing to do. But it wasn't what the expectation was. And there's a big thing around expectation with anything, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So as I was leaving the draft floor, I mean, Cliff and I locked eyes. He came over, you know, the gentleman that he is, and the professional that he is, put his arm around me. He apologized, and he mentioned that their pro scout had died of a heart attack. Like, I don't think it was the night before exactly, but I think it was like a couple days earlier.
It's close, yeah.
Yeah, and he said, you know, we kind of sentimentality kicked in, and he said we decided like Fichaud was his guy, and we decided at the last minute to take his guy in honor of him. And I'm so sorry that I said that to you yesterday, and I, you know, whatever. I mean, best of luck with your career. So. Kind of crazy, right? Like to imagine that could happen on the draft floor, right? And I mean, I don't know how much it changed my career per se, but like it had an impact 100%, you know, had an impact on the money, had an impact on maybe opportunity, had an impact on a lot of things. But, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's kind of ironic because full circle, Cliff ends up trading for me 3 years later, you know, for Kirk Muller. So he still had a soft spot for me. And then unfortunately for me, he got fired that summer, but, you know, so it goes. That's one of the wilder draft day stories that I could tell you.
Pretty crazy too, that 94 draft, because when you think about it, what went on with the Maple Leafs that day? Like you said, Mats gets acquired for Wendell in that big trade with Quebec, but there had been rumors for a long time that Cliff was really, really set on taking Brett Lindros as well, and he had fallen in love with him, and then they end up going with Fichaud when Pierre Dorion Sr. passes away, the father of the current general manager of the Ottawa Senators, and they take Fichaud, but they already had Potvin, and it's crazy how that ends up working out. And then for someone like you who was told, we're going to take you in the first round, and then you have to sit there throughout the first round, and like you said, you go in the second round. How do you just try and stay calm when you're sitting there going, oh crap, they passed on me. Now we're getting late into the first round. Now the first round is over. How the heck did you just stay calm during that lead?
Well, I mean, when the doors closed that night, I was crying like a baby, to be honest. Like that was a hard day for me, really hard day, with the expectations built up and thinking you might go top 10, and, trying to come to terms at that age with like the fact that somebody passing away somehow impacted, my draft position, and then kind of the timeliness of that. And, but like all things, it passes, like being in the crowd, it was hard, but you're mad. I don't know what there's a lot of emotions going on, right? And every pick, you kind of just get sitting lower in your seat because it's like, well, you don't know what's going to happen now, right? And it kind of just seems like it's going on forever. So, I regret the way I handled that. It kind of sounds pouty now. But I think it's just being human, like I said, like your expectation is one thing. If I would have expected to go 51 and I went 31, obviously you'd be elated with the number. I don't think the number is really that big of an impact. It's more or less like where you thought things were going to happen. Right. And because it was such a big disparity from what I thought, and, going from Toronto's first pick to Florida's third, right? Like they took Ed Jovanovski first, they took Rhett Warrener 26th, then me 31. That's just a different place in the pecking order too, right? Like the whole scenario kind of changed pretty dramatically. But again, a couple of days later, you're over it, and the draft is just one day, and then you do what you do with it, But that day itself wasn't as jubilant as maybe it might have been.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is, you just said that. Is it weird to kind of be labeled as a number when you're going into organization? Like with the Panthers, they see, okay, Ed's our number one guy. We invested a lot into him. He's the top of the chain in the pecking order in our cupboard for our prospects. Then you have Red at 26. And then do you get looked at differently when you're a second round pick or a third round pick? Is that really true when, say, you go to camp and they say, okay, well, he was a second rounder? Does that kind of get in the mind of both the player and the team a little bit?
Again, I think different organizations all handle that a little bit differently. But people would be lying if they say that it doesn't impact, like you don't look good as an organization if your first round pick doesn't make it. Right. So like there's an optics with that. Right. So like the farther down you go, the less you have invested on them on an individual level doing well. Of course, you want guys to do well within your organization, but you're not necessarily going out of your way for them. Right. If you're a ninth rounder and you play ridiculously well in camp and you're doing great in the minors, you can definitely, it happens all the time that guys work their way in the NHL, but you've seen it time and time again where a first rounder will get 5 games, they'll get 25 games, they'll maybe get a whole season, maybe they'll get traded and get another full season. Like there's longevity that comes from that draft, and it comes with chances too. So I think there is a reality to that. In Florida, I don't know. I felt like they traded me great. I was their first forward take in that draft. That was helpful too. They were a young organization, so they didn't have a lot of draft picks in the system, which was also helpful. But without question, it would be more advantageous to be Toronto's 15th pick overall, first round, their first pick, as opposed to being 31 and Florida's third pick. It's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, that's the reality of it, I guess. Mm-hmm. But you do end up coming to Toronto a couple of years later. It's now March 1997. You get traded straight up for Kirk Muller. You come here, and what was it like though joining the Leafs core that was kind of on its way out? Dougie had just been traded along with Dave Ellett to New Jersey. Wendell was back for a second turn, but a lot of those guys from the 93 and 94 runs were gone. So what was it kind of like coming into that room in the spring of 97?
For me, I was oblivious to all that, to be honest, because I wasn't a Leaf fan growing up. And even like the more I got into the more I was into junior hockey and doing your own thing, like it's really hard to, at least for me, to be a fan of the NHL. Like I didn't really know what was really going on in a lot of scenarios, right? And you're more tied into your own organization at that point. So me understanding the life cycle of some guys in that team, I really didn't know. I just knew that when I got there, obviously they weren't a playoff team. I knew that they had some really cool names like Matt Sundin and Curtis Joseph and Wendell Clark. That was kind of pretty mind blowing for me to be in the room with. So that was cool, but it was, I've spoken about it a few times. Like that trade was, completely mind blowing for me. I'd never been traded in Spokane. In junior, right? So 4 years in one team. To that point, I'd been, 3 or 4 years with the Florida Panther organization. For me, it was like, I'm going to retire as a Florida Panther with 1,000 games in the NHL. And that's kind of what I thought, and kind of, it was sort of working out that way in its weird way. I was a rookie. It was my first year pro. I'd already played, I think 29 games or something like that in Florida. They had just sent me down with great messaging too, like, hey, just go down there. Like we're in a run. You're part of this organization. I was a point a game guy down in the minors. As a 20-year-old, which is really hard to do. So I was producing down there and scoring. And they said, yeah, you'll be back. If it's not this year, like next year, we're just making a run right now. And that was kind of like the message. So I went down. I think I was down for a week at that point. I was in bed asleep for a game. And so I'm in the minors in Greensboro, North Carolina, in the minors, right? And get a phone call on trade deadline day. Like I didn't even know it was the trade deadline day, right? Completely oblivious, had no idea that I could get traded or would get traded. And then I get traded for a name like Muller and then to a team like the Leafs. And legitimately in 3 hours, I was on a plane and never saw those guys again. Never saw, my car, like my stuff, and then I'm in a town I've never been to, with players I've never met, with coaches I've never met. It was completely wild, right? On a lot of levels. And then the magnitude of being a Leaf was also very, very palpable when I got there. It was not hard to see that this was a big trade for the Leafs. It was not hard to see that the Leafs are a massively big deal. And yeah, the guys were good. Like my initial, and that's kind of, we already talked about coaching. Like Mike Murphy was there, Mike Kitchen. They were nice, but it wasn't like, I never felt like they wanted me to excel or succeed. Like it was more like, we're going to put you out there and see what happens. And there's a different kind of feel about that, and that's where I see like the coaching is now different. And now me being a coach, even like, I wish I would have had like a little bit, some deeper conversations, and even like a little bit more understanding of like, I was scared, I was scared in a lot of situations, like scared to like not be liked by my teammates, scared to fit in, scared to, how do I be an NHLer in this new environment that I've never been in before? And, and I think with some help, I could have got through that, like understanding that, hey, like they got my back. If I make a mistake out here, I'm going to get out there again. Like I'm a part of the future kind of deal, right? It was more, I never really felt that. And I wasn't prepared. I didn't have the toolkit to really get through that on my own and just say, screw it. Here it is. I'm giving her, So, yeah. So yeah, and that was kind of the feeling I got in Toronto the entire time. And I've talked to other prospects and they kind of said the same thing. And I think that was kind of that part of that era where it was sort of a sink or swim. Like either you get it right now or you don't. And we're not really trying to hold your hand through any of it. Like you're now a pro and you got to do it on your own. And I'm all about accountability. And I'm not pointing fingers at all. Like I think you're responsible for your own journey, but the environment does matter. It matters to certain guys at different times too, right? Who they feels in your quarter, in your corner. And at that point I was a little bit more fragile than maybe I should have been. And I think I could have, I would have liked to have tried that scenario again, just sort of feeling like I could exhale and, saying like, hey man, go out and give me your best. We want to see what you're all about.
Yeah. And, some people might not know this, but I guess it's kind of typical from what I've learned for if a player has a pro has a concern or something like that with how they're being used on the ice. Typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but you'll probably go to an assistant coach first, and the assistant's kind of like the middle ground between the player and head coach sometimes, and then the assistant goes to the head. So what would you think if you go back to 1997, 98 around that time, if you had gone to Mike Kitchen, what would have said if you had been in that mindset to be like, hey, you know what? I kind of just want to talk. What would you have said to him?
Well, I think that's the issue. And I think that's part of the stigma. you know, I mean, is what the issue is. And I think that's when you talk about team culture and you talk about like inclusivity and that type of aspect, like I would never have had that conversation, which is why I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, being new to an environment, they don't know me. I don't know them. I mean, they just traded a big name, their assistant captain for me. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like gladiator, right? I'm trying to be like stoic. I'm trying to be strong. Like nothing's
Nothing
bothering
bugs
me.
you.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm supposed to be here. I fit in. Like that's the way I wanted to portray. So for me to walk in there and be like, hey, you know, Kitch, I'm scared shitless right now, man. Like I just like that wouldn't have came out of my mouth, but it might have if they were asking me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like saying, hey, kid, like this is a big deal. We know this is a big deal, right? Like you must be like, I understand this is a new staff, right? I understand there's new players here. You're just trying to get your foot in the door. Like, this is how I think you're going to be a great pro, right? And I want you, you know, like if it was like that sort of a dialogue, then I think you're going to start to get the human side out of the player, you know, and talk about stuff that can help them, right? That is going to make them better. And I mean, obviously, like the full circle side of that is, I mean, you're helping me, but you're also helping your team because I'm an asset for the team. So, I mean, it you know, you want the best out of the people that are a part of your organization. So
You would think, right? Like that. Yeah.
right. And to kind of, I mean, I say that rhetorically, but it is kind of weird because in a lot of environments, it didn't honestly seem like that, right? It was like, you know, it didn't seem like on an individual basis, you are trying to figure out how to maximize this person's potential. It was more like there might be somebody in the queue that we can just plug and play, you know, and hopefully this guy might fit better. Which is, I guess, just a real side of sports and professional sports too. But I mean, different organizations do handle that kind of aspect differently. Like Detroit was amazing for years with that, right? Like being able to bring guys up and actually turn them into players, right? Like the environment there was conducive to them doing that. And yeah, anyways, I mean, it is what it is, but that was to do it again. And now like knowing what I do now with helping young players, like I know that those conversations matter and they matter to different people at different times. And all athletes, whether you're young or old, like they need that outlet. They need someone in their corner. If it happens to be your coach, amazing, or an assistant coach, amazing, but at least you need somebody in there to be able to bounce some stuff off. And at the time, I mean, I'm saying like the Leafs organization maybe should add somebody there, but I didn't really, my mom and dad were absolutely amazing, but they weren't people that I was going to talk to about that. You know, I didn't have any, there was nobody kind of in the corner that my agent wasn't really there for that kind of stuff. So I did feel like I was a bit on an island and I owned that stuff and I just tried to figure it out. And unfortunately for that 10 games with the Leafs and the initial time of my trade, I didn't think I was that bad per se, but I just wasn't as good as I could have been. Right. And that turned into be like the stage. Like that was the stage that I was on. And I think
that was the judging point. Yeah.
Well, kind of, yeah. Cause Mike Johnson came in at the same time. And I mean, Johnny and I I would call us friends. You know, we don't talk all the time, but like we were similar age, similar style player. And he performed a little bit better in that stretch. And then he was there, like the next year he was there. And I was kind of a little bit, I wasn't quite as good. And then when the changing of the guard came with Mike Smith, I made it too easy for him to be able to get away with banishing me to the minors. You know, like if that 10 games was a little more solid, then there would have been no need for him to do that, or he wouldn't even been able to do it necessarily. Right. So, I mean, that's the way the game works. And I get that now, but I mean those 10 games were pretty important for me to make a big splash, and I didn't.
Right. Yeah. I remember, and going back and looking at it, that end of that 96-97 season, you and Mike Johnson, Brandon Convery, DJ Smith, getting some looks there. And right, Mike was kind of the one who lasted into the 97-98 season when the regime changed and Cliff Fletcher was gone and Ken Dryden and Mike Smith came in. And it's a very strange that once 97-98 season, because it almost seems like you really don't know who was in charge of making the player personnel decisions that year. But you spent the year in St. John's, you had 2 really good years in St. John's. It's 72 goals combined. So when you were traded, when Mike Smith traded you in 99, did you feel any anger or angst being like, I just scored 72 goals in the AHL? Were you pissed off?
I was thankful when I got traded, I think would be a better word at that. But I mean,
Really?
but the 2 years there, I mean, it's tough, right? Because you're in a place you don't want to be, but you like being there at the same time, right? I was in St. John's, Newfoundland. I wanted to be in Toronto, but I was having an absolute blast there. I loved the people there. It's one of my favorite places I played. The teammates were great. I mean, I was playing with either Brandon Convery or Lonnie Bahanis. Usually I was like top line right wing, getting quite a bit of ice time and producing, like, so you're really torn in that environment because you're asking yourself, like, what the hell is going on? Like, imagine that right now. I mean, just fast forward that to this past season. If you had somebody who was 21 years old leading the AHL in goals and you weren't in the playoffs and the big club, you tell me that kid wouldn't get a chance?
Absolutely not. Like,
Well, that's, I mean, it'd be impossible. It wouldn't happen anymore, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it would not happen.
the media would be all over it. Like, why isn't this guy up? Like, what's going on? Give him a chance. You mean, so like, it was strange that, I mean, it was strange on a lot of levels because, again, I was supposed to be a prospect, right? I was a guy that they had traded somebody big for, that they were supposed to be developing and, like, wanting to be on the big club. And it kind of became obvious for anyone that I just wasn't a part of that plan, and who knows why, right? Because there was just no games. Even that first training camp when I came back after that 10-game audition that I told you about, I was told to go back home and get in shape. I mean, which, again, I'm kind of eyeball roll in my head because I was never out of shape ever. I mean, that was one of the big things that I had. But he said, go home and get in shape. Was the message from Mike Murphy. I came back to camp that year. I won second out of the 60 guys at camp overall. Todd Warner took first and I took second. I won a PlayStation. I remember, like, I worked my ass off all summer and had an amazing camp. Like the in scrimmage camp, I was like really solid. And then they sent me down before we even had any exhibition games. Like, it was wild, right? So when I go down to the farm, and I had 3 hat tricks in my first 4 games. I was leading the AHL in points. And I mean, I don't even think I got a call up that year. It was like, that's when you sort of are like, it's really hard. I mean, that's the mental side of the game that's tough, right? Because you feel you're doing the right things. You feel you're getting the results. You're not getting the response that you want from those in charge. Yet you still need to, keep your nose to the grindstone and give her. So, for whatever reason, that didn't work out. Ended up getting traded to. Well, and I should say, though, I mean, that was a weird time for the Leafs because they weren't producing anyone. Like, I mean, Brandon Convery was like a hell of a hockey player that they couldn't get, Jeff Ware was their other first rounder that even they couldn't really get much out of. The guys that came up was like Thomas Caberlet. Who else came up? Danny Markov came up out of that system. But it wasn't like they just sort of, they played there for half a season and they brought him up and it was like, okay, they stuck. I mean, it wasn't like a real development thing. I remember Bill Waters coming out there sporadically. And I think that was the biggest problem with St. John's, is that no one was watching.
Yeah.
Like, it was a hard place to watch, it was a hard place to get to, and you felt really disconnected. And I think that the minor league system was disconnected from it too. It was hard to call guys up, and there was just sort of different scenarios there where it just sort of never worked out for a few guys there. Even Lonnie Bahanis, like him coming up that playoff year and 99, winning the second round for you guys, like, he was unbelievable.
He was, yes.
It doesn't get re-signed and kind of disappears. And I mean, hockey's a funny thing, but anyways, that's so it goes. I ended up going to LA and things didn't go a whole lot better for me there. Almost as kind of the same scenario. The coach ended up getting fired and a new coach came in and ended up grabbing Brad Chartrand, who was my teammate in St. John's, and sort of turned him into an NHLer and whatever. I mean, that's the way it goes. It was a hell of a ride, let me tell you that.
So after the trade to the Kings and you're going through the AHL and you're going through the IHL for those next couple of years, before you ended up heading to Mannheim and going to play in Germany, again, how do you keep going through that grind that you were talking about when you're still playing and you're hoping to just get that call up to get that another chance? How did you keep going through that grind?
Well, it was interesting because I kind of felt like I was getting worse, to be honest, like as a player. Like I came up as a rookie, was over a point a game in the AHL, ended up, leading the league in goals there at one point, ended up going to Lowell with LA, led that team in goals and points. And then the next year came back when it was when I got taken off waivers by Tampa and ended up being in Detroit. And that was a year like I was like, okay, I'm taking this super serious because it was like, that was my 4th year pro, like not really getting a shake and kind of really needed to do something different. And that team was just awful. Like, we were horrendous that year. It was crazy how bad we were. Tampa's farm system was not good. The older players there weren't good. it was rough. It was the worst team I've ever played on in pro. I mean, Scotty Nickel was there, who's still a good buddy of mine now, assistant GM of the Nashville Predators. He ended up leaving that team after 7 years in the minors and making the Calgary Flames the next year. I think he's the only one that ended up doing something, and it was amazing that he was able to accomplish that. But I just remember like feeling like I wasn't getting any better, you know, like I was kind of turning into a different player. I was now blocking shots on the penalty kill, and you know, there's nothing wrong with blocking shots in the penalty kill, but I was sort of evolving in a different way. Went to Winnipeg, was okay there. Went to Bridgeport, was okay there. And I kind of just, I don't know, I was losing something on the passion side, I think. And I was also like starting to treat it more like a profession, like a monotonous job, as opposed to something that you're really excited about doing. And I think I got worse. Like I do think I got worse. Like I wasn't doing the extra at that point. I wasn't, you know, stepping into some of these opportunities maybe I had. And that was when I had the idea of going to Germany. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go there. I'm going to fall in love with the game again. I'm going to reinvent myself. You know, Bruce Boudreau, in a recent interview I had with him, he says, you know, at 2021, you're a prospect, and at 25, you're a suspect, or 25, 26, you know, and that's kind of where I felt I was. I felt like I wasn't really being given my shot at that point. I was kind of getting overlooked. So I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to come back. Guys were doing that somewhat successfully. And I went there and it was kind of like true to my prophecy. Like I ended up started off great there. I had like, I don't know, 12 goals in my first 14 games or something, and having a lot of fun in Europe, and great guys there. It was good league, everything else. But I almost started too good, because they offered me a contract extension, a 2-year contract extension, like a month and a half in or 2 months in, which they do. And they gave me a big raise, and it was almost like making one-way money in the NHL. And it was sort of it was a crossroads. I mean, to be honest, right there, it was like, I knew that if I signed that, I had security. I wasn't going to get traded anymore. I'd been traded a ton. I'd been all over North America. I was kind of over that. I knew where I would be. I knew I'd have an address. I knew it'd be a big part of the team. I'd be financially secure, but I was probably saying no to the NHL, you know? And yeah, I had to come to terms with that. And in that, I was like, you know what? I guess this is good. Yeah, maybe this is where I was supposed to be. So I ended up signing that extension and played 2 years in Mannheim. And yeah, no regrets there. I mean, you never know. It'd be interesting to maybe come back. But I think, you know, I did try when I was 30, came back and tried out for the Wings, and it just didn't happen there again. Got hurt in camp. I thought I was going to have a great opportunity to make that team. But, you know, the NHL just wasn't what I ended up wanting it to be. But hockey was still amazing to me. And, you know, being able to play in Europe and in Germany and experience that country and that culture, and I mean all the experiences over there, it was like honestly so grateful and so blessed, like everything that I saw with this game.
Is it something you'd recommend to somebody who might be in a similar situation? They may be playing in the AHL, the ECHL, and they've been traded a couple of times, and they might have an offer and they're thinking about going over to Europe. It might be a bit of a culture shock, but would you recommend going over to Czech Republic or Germany or something like that to play as you did?
If it appeals to them. I mean, I consider myself a curious and adventurous kind of guy. I'm interested in a lot of stuff. I enjoy culture. You know, I went to Japan. I pulled myself out of university to go to Japan when I got a contract offer after I kind of retired, in air quotes, the first time. Right. And it was more like, yeah, I mean, you kidding me? I'm going to go to Japan.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
You know, like that would be fun. But, you know, I would recommend it for that. I think like the hockey is good. You can get paid well in the right leagues. You get taken care of really well. It might not be an amazing career move if like the NHL is your ultimate goal. You know, I think like the guys that stay there and are part of that system and you're more watched and you're more in people's faces. I mean, I think that's probably a wiser thing, but I mean, everyone recharges their batteries different. You know, I think that my original idea there of going over for a year at 26 was actually pretty smart. You know, I mean, I think it was turning into what I wanted it to be. I was got back to the offensive side of the game, which I liked and enjoyed, and started associating myself with a goal scorer and starting getting that confidence back, you know, and yeah, I mean, who knows what would have happened if I would have played the 1 year there and came back to an NHL training camp. You know, I mean, you never know. So I think it's not a bad idea either way, right? It's a great way to get to travel and see the world and get paid for it. That's for sure.
For sure. It sounds like an amazing experience, and just to have the stability, because you mentioned the trades and the waivers and stuff like that. What is it like to go through the process of a trade? I know if for anybody who's watching, who's seen the movie Moneyball, and Brad Pitt says to Jonah Hill's character, he says, no, you just tell them straight up. They're they're pros. They deal with it. They have to do that, and they go through the trade of I believe it's Pena in the movie. Is it similar to that? Is it? I guess it maybe depends on where you are, but what is it like to go through that multiple times?
Well, it sucks. I mean, I was thankful now. I mean, now I have 3 boys at home and a wife. Like, I couldn't imagine doing that with a family. I mean, I did every time I was single, you know? So every time I was single, it was just me I had to worry about. I wasn't changing schools or having, you know, my wife picking up and finding a new network of friends and, you know, all that stuff. It was just me. And as soon as I got implanted in a new team, at least I had new friends and new buddies and a new ecosystem, you know? So definitely easiest on the player, but it's hell of a hard. It's hard, you know, like I said, it happens without you knowing. And it happens in the span of like such a short time frame that would blow normal people with normal jobs mind. Right. I mean, can you imagine getting called right now and saying you're leaving in 2 hours on a plane and you're going to live in Nebraska and go find an apartment? You know, I mean,
No.
you know what I mean? Like it's something
Yeah.
that a lot of people just, you don't even go there, right, on a normal level. And a lot of people I really don't think could handle it. Like, I mean, it's not normal. Right. And yeah, I got traded 3 times and I got taken off waivers once. And that was all before I was 25. Right. So, and all of them were like that. I mean, I said like the first one with Toronto, it was a phone call, Florida, that maybe was a 2-minute phone call, right? Like,
That's
hi,
it.
Jason, Brian Murray. Thanks for your time. We just traded you to Toronto Maple Leafs. Best luck in your career. Click, you know, and it's like, what? Like, that's the extent of it, you know? And when I got taken off waivers, I don't even think Dave Taylor told me. I think it was somebody else in with the Kings that told me. Like, it's really weird. It's really, you know, it's not empathetic. There's nothing empathetic about it. There's nothing.
One of those sink
you
or
know,
swim things again, right?
yeah, it's just, I mean, it's like you're you're a pawn on a chessboard and we just decided to move you, you know, so see you later. Right. And I guess you know that. I mean, when you're in it, you know it.
Yeah.
I do think there's ways to improve that. And I have even in my own podcast there, Up My Hockey, I've covered that with guys and some guys in different organizations have felt that they got treated really right and well in that scenario, you know, like even maybe notified before, given time to prepare, you know, how do you want this to be real? You know, it can be handled differently for different guys. And sometimes it's handled better than others, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Trades are a crazy thing. And to experience them is, well, it tests your mettle. And I mean, it's definitely made me stronger and it makes you adaptable and it makes you, you know, resilient and all these things, but it's definitely something that's, you know, I don't think you ever really prepare for or are prepared for necessarily.
It is a crazy thing. Like you said, I couldn't imagine picking up the phone right now and somebody saying, yeah, you know, we traded you to this other business in Idaho. It's like, I don't really want to live in Idaho, but okay, I guess I'm going to have to do that. Yeah, it's definitely a crazy thing. But Jason, before we get to your first item that you're gonna share with us, I have one last question for you. And if you go to Jason's Hockey DB page, there's his headshot there with the Florida Panthers. And you look pretty angry or kind of surly in this picture. And I'm assuming this is something from Media Day or maybe with the Panthers. When it comes to those pictures and having to do that, is this something players kind of just don't like to do?
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and you don't even know really when, like, I don't know how Hockey DB got that picture or even like, I don't have that picture. I've never seen that picture except for Hockey DB. Right. So, you know, when you're in that environment and in that ecosystem, you are getting a lot of pictures at different times and you don't know when they're coming. I think a little bit of it is a machoism persona at the time. I mean, you got to think in the 90s too, right? I mean, it was a tough, rough sport. And, you know, so I think you were trying to project some type of toughness, you know, in those pictures. So not necessarily that you were mean or not, you know, or that maybe I was having a bad day. I think that was more probably a calculated scenario. If this is the picture that's in the program or the other team's going to see, then this is how I want to be portrayed, you know, that
Tough as nails.
I don't have a big smile on my face, you know, which now I would do that, right? Because that's more natural. But anyways, that's probably where that came from. It was more me being a projection of who I thought I was supposed to be, as opposed to what I actually felt.
Very interesting. Learn something new. I always wondered about that. It's like, I wonder how they're doing that. If there's any thought process going into to pictures and stuff like that. But Jason, thank you so much for that detailed history of your career, right from Spokane to Mannheim. And I'm very curious to see what you've collected over those years. So we're going to take a break and hear from one of our sponsors, but coming up in just a sec, Jason's first item. We'll be right back.
Hey there. Just want to say thank you, as usual, for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying this conversation between Nick and myself. I thought Nick did a really great job for his sixth episode of just handling the interview and connecting it. I'm starting to get a greater appreciation for the skill involved in conducting an interview and making it, interesting and conversational and seamless. And if Nick, if you're listening, I want to thank you for doing such a good job with that. I felt really comfortable throughout that interview. In saying that, thank you guys for listening. The podcast just continues to grow. It's crazy. Like watching the episode downloads and the listenership and the people that are writing me, thank yous and sharing me their stories of the difference that it's making for them is really, really exciting. And I can't say enough about, you guys giving me the reason to keep going and understanding that this is actually making a difference for people, and people find it not only useful and entertaining, but you find it valuable. Kids are getting some solid messaging from this. Parents are learning to maybe reconnect with the game on a little different level. And I just love hearing that. So once again, thanks so much. The Jared Smithson episode really seemed to cross the boundaries between, hockey, just complete hockey fans or hockey people into people who are just interested about how to be a better human being, because that episode has really blown up. It was one of the most successful to date, and all the episodes of late are just on the uptick. So it's exciting. Whatever you're doing out there, I appreciate it. Whether it's sharing it on social, whether it's talking to your friends about it, talking over coffee about it, sharing it with your families, it's working, because again, there is not a penny spent on this as far as advertising is concerned. There's no paid sponsorship. There's nothing pushing this other than word of mouth. And it's super exciting to see how powerful word of mouth can be. So I will bring you back now to the episode, and it's so weird to bring you back into something that I'm the guest on, but here we go. Going back to the conversation with me, Jason Podollan.
And we're back, episode number 6 of Jersey Stories with Jason Podollan. He gave us a nice little outlook on his career, spanning from the juniors in Spokane all the way up to his time in Germany. So he must have collected some really cool things. So Jason, it's item number 1.
Item number 1. Well, I think I'll start with the great one. Wayne Gretzky, because why wouldn't you? Even though he wasn't necessarily my player growing up, like I was a Mario Lemieux fan through and through, and he was my idol. But it was impossible not to massively respect Wayne and what he was accomplishing and who he was. And when Mike Barnett called me in my leading up to my draft year, who was Wayne Gretzky's agent at the time and wanted to represent me, it was. That in and of itself was a massive honor and super prestigious to be able to field that phone call. And, he essentially had me, as I'm sure he did a lot of these young prospects, with even that phone call, right. And who he had in his stable. And part of that, his recruitment process, meaning Mike Barnett's, was to bring me to Calgary to watch the Kings play the Flames in a Stanley Cup playoff game. And so I was there with Mike Barnett, and he was filling my head full of big dreams and custom gloves and all the rest of it. And after the game, he brought me down underneath in the concourse to meet Wayne. Kind of. He was baiting that hook, right? That maybe we'll meet Wayne and stuff. And so I was like, okay, great. So we waited out there, and Wayne had 2 goals and an assist that night. He was first or second star as usual. And
Wayne, yeah. And
he came out, and of course was like trying to get swarmed by people or whatever. And he was super gracious, but like allowed us to have some room. And kind of Mike Barnett introduced me to Wayne, and Wayne shook my hand and instantly started asking me questions, like engaging me on where I was playing, what type of season I had, what I wanted to do as a hockey player. And like it was captivating, really. It felt like I was.
Were you starstruck a little bit?
What's that?
Were you starstruck a little bit? Be like, holy crap, this is Wayne Gretzky. I get to
Well,
talk
of
with Wayne
course.
Gretzky.
I mean, of course. But he had such an amazing way of making you feel comfortable, right? Like, again, by engaging me, like it wasn't awkward silence. I wasn't there like ogling him. He was talking to me, and he made it easy for me to have a conversation with him. And I don't know really how long that time went, but it seemed like minutes, and I'm pretty sure it was. And at one point during the conversation, one of their trainers came up, or he called one of his trainers over and said something to him, which I couldn't hear. Trainer left, and then he came back with 2 sticks, his shiny Easton sticks, right? Again, he's still talking to me. He's not looking at these sticks. He's not talking to me about the sticks. He signs the sticks, both of these sticks, gives them both back to the trainer, and then the trainer leaves. I didn't even really see where the trainer went. So we continue the conversation. Mike Barnett then, Wayne Gretzky actually invites me to dinner, which blows my mind. Mike Barnett overhears, and he's like, no, Wayne, like, we got to go talk some business still, like, whatever. I don't know if that was part of the shtick or what, but like, I was like, I want to go to dinner.
Yeah, no
Wayne,
kidding.
right? So anyway, so that got kiboshed. But then before we left, he's like, oh, Jason, I got something for you. So he turned around and he walked back and got one of the sticks that he asked the trainer for that was leaning against the wall. And he walked back over to me and he gave it to me and he said, hey, best of luck in your career. I scored a goal with this in the 3rd period tonight. I just wanted you to have this as a keepsake. And I looked at it and said to Jason, best wishes, Wayne Gretzky. And again, for me now, who is a guy that wishes I was good with names and consciously tries to be good with names, like, here's Wayne Gretzky, who got introduced to an 18-year-old kid, got introduced. Here's Jason. Like, he remembered that 3-4 minutes into the conversation to write that on a stick. Like, that in of itself was like powerful. And it just was a massive testament to what an amazing gentleman he is. And there's almost nobody in the game that can find anything bad to say about Wayne. And because he's that kind of guy, and I use that story as an example with the players that I work with and that I mentor. And it's just, you always have an opportunity to make an impression, right? You're always able to impact somebody. And I think Wayne really was conscious about that he was able to impact people and leave memories and marks, and he wanted them to be positive. And that definitely was, I ended up getting to play against him too. Like, that's one of the, I only played 41 games in the NHL, but one of them was against Wayne Gretzky. And that was super cool. And, when I have a stick on my wall, and that's definitely one of the highlights for me is having his stick.
An amazing tale of meeting Wayne Gretzky. I've never had the chance to meet Wayne, but of those that I know who have, they say the exact same thing. Wayne takes the time to talk with you, learn your name, make you feel special, make you feel like there's that connection that gives you that moment. And so when you were playing and your days after playing, have you kind of been the same way? And anytime somebody who's asked you to chat about your time, whether it's been the AHL, NHL, Germany, do you kind of make sure that you take the time and tell those stories too, to kind of have that moment?
Now I am conscious of it, like in a cognizant way, and again, I'm it's not like it is when I was playing, right? Because when I was playing, there's not as many people want to talk, but now I'm in a position of, I'm a podcast host. I'm a mentor. I'm a local sort of community guy that's involved in hockey, and I've been in the NHL. So now I understand that there is some type of responsibility that comes with that. And I respect that, and I respect what that allows me to do, and the doors that it allows me to open, and the conversations it allows me to have. So I really do try and take the time now. I think people are an amazing part of the hockey community, and should be treated as such. So, I mean, when I do those conversations now, I do try and authentically connect and have those moments, again, not from a situation where I feel I'm providing this person with a moment, but just having real conversations, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's an important aspect of what we do on a daily basis, and a skill we can definitely develop. And I think that was a skill that, that Wayne had. To get back to your question, as a player, I do feel that I was kind of naturally okay at that, if I can say that. Like, I wasn't rushing past fans. I always took the time to joke or to try and get them to have a laugh, or to I guess I just say have that connection or have that moment. I never felt better than, I never felt entitled in that scenario. I always felt appreciative. So I think that reflected in my relationships with those that chose to want to have a conversation with me. And, I guess everyone has bad days, and maybe I wasn't always that way, but I think I was naturally like that and was appreciative of the attention, whatever attention I got.
And I guarantee those who you did talk to when you were a player were appreciative of that. Anytime that I had the chance to meet an NHLer, when I was growing up. It always stuck with me. It's one of those things that sticks with you when you were a little guy. That's definitely for sure. So it's an amazing.
I even say that to my sorry to cut you off, but even say that to like my oldest son or like my players on my hockey team. It's like no matter whether you're 11 or whether you're 13 or whether you're Wayne Gretzky and a Hart Trophy winner, like somebody somewhere is looking up to you, you know, and how you carry yourself matters, how you interact with those people matters, the impressions you make matter, and your example matters, and yeah, you don't have to be a guy wearing an NHL jersey to have an impact. You know, that's for darn sure. And the earlier that we recognize that and have conversations about it, just makes us better people, right? And I think those are good skills to develop.
Yeah, it just also continues a cycle of goodness, if that makes sense. Like I remember Glenn Healy, and I told the story in our second episode with Mike Ross. Glenn Healy invited me and my dad over to his house because my dad fixed some lawn equipment for him, and he signed a bunch of stuff for me. And he took the time to chat about his cup with the Rangers and his time with the Leafs, and it absolutely made my day. And I want to spread those good stories, and I find that it just continues a cycle of good stories and good people doing good things, if that makes sense. Weirdly enough, but
no, it totally does.
That's unbelievable that you had that awesome interaction with Wayne, and he's given you that nice stick with that sweet autograph. Wayne's always had one of the best ones. So I'm really excited to see now what you have for us for item number 2. We're going to take a quick break, but Jason's going to come right back with a second item here on Jersey Stories.
So we're making use, I guess, of Nick's breaks. He was planning breaks for his sponsors, which I think is a good time to maybe talk about sponsorship, because the success of the podcast is real. And there have been a few people, a couple companies reaching out, interested in sponsoring the podcast. I'm not in a huge rush to choose one or to pick one. I'm grateful that people want to be a part of it, of course. But I'm kind of in just a collection phase right now. So if there is a sponsor out there that you think aligns well with Up My Hockey, that there would be synergies involved between the two of us, please, reach out to me. If maybe you have a company that's interested, maybe there's somebody would be interested. Please let me know who that is. And if you have any suggestions, maybe you just know the two brands, you know what My Hockey's all about, and you know what this other brand is all about, and you think they would go well together, I'd be more than willing to reach out to said company. So it's an interesting time right now for Up My Hockey, because we are starting to explore sponsorship options, and it'd be great to have somebody on here that wants to have their name recognized to the audience here that we've developed, and promote what they have going on. So again, I'm all ears, and would love to hear some of your suggestions. So please send them along. Best way to do that is at jason@upmyhockey.com, jason@upmyhockky for interest in sponsorships or suggestions. So now back to the episode.
All right, we are back here, episode number 6 of Jersey Stories with Jason Podollan. He's got this lovely Wayne Gretzky autograph stick that he shared with us. And what do you have for us for item number 2?
Well, I guess I'm going to go backwards down the timeline for this one. And I'm an 8-year-old kid at this point, just a fan, just a guy who wanted, loved the game and wanted to be in the NHL, and probably the glory years sort of my fandom. I think, I'm not sure, but maybe every kid, like that kind of 8 to 12-ish range is
that's when you lock, right? That's the key age.
I think so, because you're nowhere near an adult. You're nowhere near a man, right? And these figures that are playing on the TV just seem superhuman, and it's just such an interesting, magical time, really. And it was 1985, and the All-Star game was in Calgary, and I was just about to. So it was 1985. I was born in '76, so I was 8, just about to turn 9. So it was for my birthday present that my dad got tickets to the All-Star game in Calgary. And my dad, being a little bit of a maverick and a little bit of a guy who doesn't like rules too much, he concocted this plan prior to us even going to get us in the dressing room. And so, like, it was back in the day when, like, the printers were like the size of your car, and you know, and PCs could barely fit on a desk, and the printer paper was the type that had the holes on the outside that had to run through the thing. And anyways, we had this Word program going, and we made a press pass. Essentially, he made a press pass for himself, laminated this thing that said press on it. Brought his camera that I think he may even borrowed some special camera that made it look like he was some professional. And so we watched the game, and we go down with every other fan that wanted autographs after. And he goes, "Stick with me, stick on my hip," he says, you know, and I'm like 7 or 8 or whatever I said I was. And he's got this pass, and he showed it. And I mean, there was no such thing as like official press passes back then, I guess. And got the head nod, and we were in the dressing room. We got into both the dressing rooms, the Wales conference and the Campbell conference. And I was on absolute cloud 9 in there, if you can imagine, like, you know, like every single star, like walking around and having interviews, and I could talk to whoever I wanted to. And ended up meeting Mario. It was a little bit of a downer. I mean, he was young at that point. Like, I think it was maybe his rookie game. So he didn't speak any English at that point. So, I mean, there was no necessarily conversation. I got an autograph, which was super cool. Ended up having a conversation, and this is where the story goes, with Tom Barrasso. So it was his second year in the league. He was, I think, 19. He'd just come off a Vezina Trophy and a Calder, and he was just an amazing dude. Again, right? Just took the time with this 8-year-old kid. Like, didn't rush me through. Like, got down on one knee, grabbed a stick that he used that game. It's got a crack in it, and like in a puck mark and stuff. And he says, "Here, I use this in the All-Star game." And like, and that was, again, I mean, was I a Tom Barrasso fan prior to that? No. You know, like, do I think he's an amazing dude now? Yeah, 100%, you know, and his stick's on my wall, and he had an amazing career and everything else. But it was more just because it was like, I almost had to figure out who he was after I left. You know what I mean? Like, at 8, I didn't know everybody. Like, I knew who he was, and all these guys were good, but I had to like find out who he was after, and realized, you know, how kind of what a big deal he really was at that time, you know, and that he didn't have to do that, and that there was a lot of other people there, and, you know, all these other things that made that moment special for me. And looking back on it now, like, who knows? I have no idea, but he was only 19 himself, right? Like, that might've been part of it at that point, because, you know, he was a kid too, right? And maybe he had a little bit of that youthful exuberance in him still. I don't know what he was like later on in his career at all, but I just know that dressing room story and that moment in time with me on my birthday, and spending 5 minutes with Tom Barrasso and having his stick and carrying that stick out of there with a big smile on my face. I happened actually to get Steve Yzerman's stick there also, but that was really awesome for me, because he was more on my radar of like, plus I was a forward and everything else, right? But he never gave me the stick. I asked a trainer if I could have somebody's stick, and he came back with Steve Yzerman. So me having Steve Yzerman's stick is super cool, but I never really actually met him, and he never physically gave it to me. But I did. I walked out of that dressing room with 2 sticks, Steve Yzerman's and Tom Barrasso. So that was a pretty awesome trip for me.
Good call by your dad to make the fake pass. Now, did you ever get a chance to tell Tom this story? Have you ever said, "Hey, Tom, I got this stick. Do you remember giving this to me back at the '85 All-Star game?"
Never met him. I've never met him since, and I never had a chance to play against him either. So no, but I would definitely. He would obviously be something that I would have no problem telling him and sharing. I even got a picture from it too. So there's photographic proof as well as a stick.
Okay, I'm making it my goal now for a future episode that we're gonna get Tom Barrasso on, and we're gonna connect you and Tom together and share that awesome All-Star memory. But did your dad ask any questions? Like, did he pretend to actually be a reporter, or did he just show the pass? No, he didn't ask anything. It was just to get you in there to meet
just to get me in there, and then he would take pictures of me with whoever I was talking to, right? So there was a Rolodex of kind of photos of me with NHL guys. But yeah, no, he wasn't taking notes or interviewing anybody. He was just officially just to try and get us through the door. Once we were in, we were in.
Bless hockey dads, right? Because my dad did a similar thing. I'll tell you a quick story before we get to your third item. It was the 2006-2007 season for the Oshawa Generals. John Tavares is playing for the Generals at the time, right? I had a rookie card of John, and I thought it was so cool. And my dad said, "We're going to get that signed for you today." And so my dad happened to work with his boss at the time was a scout for the Sarnia Sting. And so we go down to where the security, we have no proof of anything of who we are, right? No proof that we're going to meet his scout. But my dad just says, he was always a smooth talker, and he said to the security people, he's like, "Oh, we're going to meet his boss at the time's name. We're going to meet him." He said to me, just down there, Oh yeah, okay, sure. So we walk down there before the game starts, and the Gens are coming off the ice from warm up, and here comes John and stuff, and I talked to him and give him my card, and he was a nice guy, and he signs this big, beautiful. I'll splice in a picture of the card here. I think I have it somewhere over here in one of my binders. He signs it. He couldn't have been more nice. And I was actually on the subway in January of 2020 when the Leafs were doing their outdoor practice, and I don't think John was. I think he looked kind of tired. They just uh, come off a game, I think the night before. And I don't think he fully took in what I was saying, but still I got to share that. Like, hey, John, remember this 13 years ago when you signed this card? He clearly didn't, but he was still nice enough to put up with my story. But yeah, similar thing. Bless hockey dads for helping guys like me and your dad as well, meeting some of their heroes. Really cool.
My heart was beating so fast. Like I remember that like it was yesterday. Like whether we were gonna make it through security there,
yes.
right? Like oh
yes,
my gosh,
like, oh crap! What if we get caught? Type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But that's awesome that you got to meet some of your favorite hockey stars. So now I'm really intrigued to see what you have for item number 3 after 2 amazing stories. We're going to take a quick break and be right back with Jason Podollan.
Hey there, guys. Just thought I would take this last break because I never really asked specifically for your support in a review on iTunes. It seems like this is a really hard thing for people to do, and I'm not really sure why. There's a lot of you that are listening on iPhones. I get those stats, and that is, as far as I know, the only podcast platform that allows ratings and reviews, written reviews. And it does make a difference on that platform. I think almost 80% of you are listening on iTunes and on iPhones, somewhere around that number for every episode. So, 4 out of 5 of you listening right now are probably doing it on an iPhone. And I know how many people download the episode, and I also know how many reviews there actually are on the podcast. So the numbers just don't add up. And honestly, it is such an easy thing to do. You just go to the podcast. It's the first thing you see up in the up on the heading bar there. It says ratings and reviews, and you can leave your own rating and you can leave your own review. It would be super beneficial to the podcast. It does help in the organic search for people when they look up hockey podcasts or what they're listening to or what iTunes chooses to show people who listen to hockey podcasts. And the more that Up My Hockey gets showed to people, obviously, the quicker the messaging that we're talking about here gets into other people's playlists. So please do that. Take the time, press pause, leave a couple of reviews there if you haven't already, and it would be much appreciated. And it'll be appreciated by the person who gets to experience it because of the time you took to take the review and increase the search results for Up My Hockey. So I'll leave you guys with that. Now back to the interview and my third memory here, my third favorite memory of playing.
And we're back with Jason Podollan, episode number 6 here of Jersey Stories. He had pretty cool times as a kid at the 1985 All-Star Game, getting a Steve Yzerman stick, a Tom Barrasso stick. How do you top that? What's item number 3?
As you just did that lead in, I do have to say that because it goes hand in hand here. What I'm going to talk about is a picture that was given to me by a local photographer in Spokane. So it was something that was unexpected and it was a gift, and what it represents is really special. But there was a time in Germany, which I'll just go quickly, where a fan also gave me a present and a gift. It's just one that was completely unexpected, and I'll do a Cole's notes on it. But she showed up at the arena in Mannheim with her horse. A full-size horse that had my number, like, I don't know how you do it, like haircutted into like the flank. So there's like number 9 on the flank and something else on the other. It was the most absurd, ridiculous thing I'd ever seen. I got to sit on it because like Mannheim Arena was right in this park downtown. So like there was this grass around I have no idea how she got it there. Like there was a horse in this park with my number on the butt, but anyways, like I just remember that now for the first time. That was hilarious. So that was a very good memory. I don't think many guys can say they've had a horse at the arena brought to them by a fan with their number.
How do you deal with that as a player when you heard of this news. I don't know who would have said it to you, but somebody come up to you and be like, yeah, this lady's got a horse outside for you.
Seriously, it was so strange.
What?
We talked about it, like, I mean, to be warm, right? Like
Yeah.
it was really shocking, and like it was really weird, honestly, right? But it was
No
still
kidding.
super memorable. So, I mean, I tried to be as nice as I can. She didn't speak great English. I was obviously her favorite player, you know, and so you have to respect that, you know, and I'm not necessarily a horse guy either. Not that I'm anti-horse, but I'm not.
No,
like,
it just you don't know enough.
Yeah. So anyway,
Strange.
but no, but back to my last keepsake, which is super special because one, Spokane for me was a really special place. You know, it wasn't always roses. There was definitely some valleys, but you know, formative years, right? 16 to 19 years old, 4 years with one team, a Canadian playing in the United States. My billets were amazing. You know, a lot of great memories and some good teams there. And we happened to close down an old arena and open a new one, which you guys are familiar there with the Maple Leaf Gardens. We had something called the Boone Street Barn, and it was just this mecca of hockey, and like the way that it was constructed in the boards, and every time you'd get a hit, like the crash would go through the building, and you get that ripple down the boards, and it was just an awesome, really special place to play. And in my third year, we closed that building down, and the last Chief regular season game there, which at the time, I mean, we were aware that it was the last regular season game, and there was some pomp and some hype about that being the last game. But actually, no, it was a playoff game. I'm saying if it wasn't a regular season game, it was a playoff game. We were in the playoffs, and we didn't know when the last game would be at that point, right? And
awesome.
I ended up I had 2 goals and an assist or something in that game, and I ended up being the first star. So, which was fine. We ended up getting knocked out though, and that was the last game that was ever played. And then, so the next year when I showed up, this photographer gave me the picture that I sent you, which is my skate leaving the Boone Street Barn, and he named it the last skate. My skate was the last player skate to ever skate on that ice, because I was the first star of the game getting called out. So, like, super nostalgic, and like that's really been special to me that I was the last player to skate on that ice surface as a Spokane Chief, and that's in the hallway here in the house, and just always a reminder when I walk into my office of a real special time and a special place, and being a part of a pretty cool piece of history.
It is pretty neat, especially when you're a part of a pretty historic franchise in junior hockey like Spokane. And what if you can just think right off the top of your head and picture back in your mind and see it, what was your favorite goal that you ever scored in the
Favorite
WHL?
goal?
In the WHL, yeah. Or one that distinctly sticks out that you close your eyes and you can just see it being played right out in your head.
You know what I see, and which is awful, and I know there's other guys wired like me, but I see a post that I hit.
Of all things, a post?
Yeah, we were in a playoff run. We were ranked number 1 CHL team in the world or whatever, right? Out of all 3 leagues, we were ranked number 1 from those rankings going into the playoffs. We had a really strong team, and it was my last year. Just got off a World Junior gold medal. All the confidence in the world came back and kind of caught fire, and we were down to Portland 3-0. So we were number 1 ranked team in the CHL in the first round, playing a 6th seed in our division, and we were down 3-0. And we were going to make history either way, Nick, because a first seed had never lost in the first round, and the team had never come back from down 3-0. So either way, we were making history. And it was one of the only times that Mike Babcock, who was my coach at the time, he pulled me aside. I mean, I was his guy that year, but he would never have told me that, like he was just that he was then how he is now, kind of.
Yeah.
And, but he pulled me aside before game 4 and he said, "Hey, this is your team, man. We gotta ride you." He's like, let's get her done. If we're going to do this, we're going to need you. And that was just kind of the confidence, boost that I needed, and ended up catching fire and had 21 goals in 16 games. Like, we got out of that series. We won game 7 in overtime. It was amazing. Still one of the highlights of my entire career to be able to accomplish that. And then we rolled through Kamloops, which had Jerome McGinley and, all the Shane Doan and Tyson Nash and Strudwick and Lukowicz and all these guys. We rolled through them. And then we ran into Brandon in the final. So I had, like I said, 21 goals in 16 games getting there, scored 3 goals against Brandon in the first 2 games. We came back home, and it was a shorthanded breakaway that I had. We were up by, I think we were tied. It was second period. We were tied. I shorthanded breakaway, beat Lehner to his glove, but I hit the post and it never went in. And that looking, and then I never scored again. I mean, so then we end up losing in 5 games. So we never got to the Memorial Cup. And for whatever reason, that post has just always sat in my head. And I don't remember any of the 21 others that playoff. I remember the post, and kind of, it's because when you're a scorer like that, it's crazy, right? When things are going and you're feeling the mo and things are rolling, it's fun, right? And stuff's happening. And then like there was that moment and it didn't go. And then it was just like, it kind of just stopped going, you know, it wasn't going in. And yeah, kind of our hopes and dreams sort of died with that post. And I always wanted to get to the Memorial Cup. So
isn't it weird though, how the human mind works, how you tend to remember the bad sometimes more than the good? Like all those goals that you scored in that time frame, you had 21 goals, and yet it's the post that sticks out the most. It's always, it's crazy how the human mind works. But
I know. I got one for you.
Okay, here we go.
A quick one.
Yeah.
Semifinal World Juniors. That's when always been big. So we were playing Russia. It was 1-1. I hadn't scored yet in that tournament. I was playing well, but it was the first time they've ever had that format where it went to a semifinal final. So we had to beat Russia to get to the gold. And I scored coming off the wing, put one underneath the Russians' goal armpit, kind of hit him in the 7-hole. And then ended up scoring again that game. But that goal was like huge for our team. It was huge for me on a personal level. We ended up getting into the gold medal. We won the gold medal, and still one of the massive highlights of my career. So, I mean, I think that first goal against Russia would be one that stands out.
What's it like to put a Canada jersey on? Like I have one actually right here beside me right now. And I love to wear it during the World Juniors, the Olympics, but to actually put a Canada jersey on and play for Team Canada, like you're representing an entire nation. And right around that time would have been when the World Juniors started to get real popular too. What's that like?
Nothing beats it. Yeah, I mean, you've heard it before. I mean, I've had guys on my podcast where you know, there's guys that can go on and play 10, 12, 15 years in the NHL, and if they won gold at the World Juniors for Canada, like that's their highlight, assuming they never won a cup, right? But I mean, it always ranks up there, like in that type of rarefied air. There's something completely special, and it's such a moving thing because again, like you have those formative years of 8, 9, 10, you're at home, you're watching, it's become a part of Canadian culture, right? You do this over the Christmas break. You watch these kids who are wearing their heart on their sleeve every Christmas trying to get this thing done. And then now you're a part of this thing. You know, now you're a part of that crew, that special crew, the best 20 players in Canada. To do that is wild. And you realize it at the time, like you 100% realize it. You know how special it is and how hard it is. But, you know, even now, like looking back, right? I mean, 4 different NHL teams, scoring here, scoring there. I had a pretty successful career. Like that is definitely like way up there. To be able to do that and wear that jersey is a super special thing.
I can still watch whether it's World Juniors, Olympics, World Championship, whatever it happens to be, when a Team Canada team wins gold and they're all standing on the blue line watching the flag go up and they're singing that anthem, it gets me every time. So for you to be able to do that, I'm sure going back and watching something like that, it probably feel all those emotions.
Well, there's something so innocent about it, right? And I think that's why it's so compelling for the average fan, is because, you know, none of us, you're kids, right? You're kids and you're still chasing that dream. Nobody there has played in the NHL yet. You know, you've had great careers, obviously, but you're emotional, you're young, you're trying to figure it out. And like, how can you not get behind an 18-year-old kid that's just pouring it all out, you know, every night? You know, it's something that's easy to fall in love with. And I think that's what, you know, TSN has done such an amazing job of capturing, and really we owe it to them. Like their coverage of that event has been something really special for Canadians to follow. Yeah,
it really has that. And these right from 91 onwards, and that big one with Lindros, and then since then it's just exploded into this thing. Like you said, it's a 2-week phenomenon right around the Christmas break. You know, you have your Christmas Day, and then Boxing Day, maybe you do some shopping, and you come home and it's World Junior time. And it's one of those great traditions. Hopefully it's just as good this year in a bubble coming up. And coming up in just a sec, we're going to take our last break, and I'm going to share a quick story about this jersey number 6 in my collection, this signed Phil Kessel jersey. And so we will be right back with Jason Podollan here on Jersey Stories. Yeah, to win a World Junior, man, that's got to be up there as just. It's an amazing feeling, right? Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. Do you remember singing the anthem and then doing the whole, you're on the blue line and stuff?
100%. And it was a relief too, right? Because I mean, there's always pressure on Canada, but for us, it was the fourth one in a row. So like, you did not want to be the team that was gonna like not get it, right? It was to get it done was a big relief, and also, I mean, jubilation too, for sure, right?
Yeah, because the way the attention that it gets on it, it's almost like Olympics junior now, right?
Yeah,
it has been. Yeah. All right. And we're back to conclude episode number 6 of Jersey Stories. And Jason, you've shared with us your Wayne Gretzky autograph, your Tom Barrasso stick, that sweet picture of you being the last player to come off the old barn back in Spokane. And I'm not sure this jersey lives up to what you've brought to the table, but it's a pretty cool one because it's one of my signed jerseys. I got this jersey for Christmas back in would have been 2009, this Phil Kessel jersey, and I'll splice in a picture. And this is one of the ones that the Leafs started wearing in 2007. That was the T-shirt jersey, as they called it, where there was a little bit of lack of detail. You had the focus on the logo, but there was no shoulder patch. There were no stripes at the bottom. But still, I really wanted a Phil Kessel jersey because the Leafs had gone a little bit of time without a real true superstar, real goal-scoring monster since Matt Sundin had retired. Went through a couple of seasons where they didn't really have that go-to top guy. And so I remember the trade in the preseason of 2009. Said, I got to get myself a Phil Kessel jersey. And I did. And Phil came here, and Phil did what he did, right? He scored goals. And no matter what you think of Phil on or off the ice, he came here, he scored a lot of goals. And I really wanted to meet him. And I did at what was then the MasterCard Center where the Leafs practice out in Etobicoke. And I don't know if I feel bad about this, but I don't like bugging players. And what I mean by that is, if they're just out on their own doing something. Back when I was younger anyways, I don't ask for autographs anymore, but asking for an autograph, I never really wanted to intrude a lot, especially, never ask somebody while they're eating. That type of thing, right? That's just especially if they're with their family, don't bug them. And Phil was on his phone, and I didn't know if I'd ever get the chance to meet him. And Phil was talking basketball with somebody as he was walking through the parking lot. You can't do it anymore. They've fenced it off, and for good reason, because who knows? I could have been some nutcase approaching him, right? Mm. And so I remember Phil just being on his phone, and I had my jersey. I said, Phil, can you please sign my jersey? And he gave the autograph that's on the top of the 8 there. And it was cool. He could have said no, but it was nice of him. And I got to have that moment with, one of the superstars of that era of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And so I have to ask you, Jason, what was the weirdest thing you have signed, or the strangest location or time where you've been asked to sign an autograph?
Oh, wow. You put me on the spot here. Strangest thing I've signed.
You ever signed
I think I signed that horse.
You signed the horse?
I think I signed the horse.
With
how's that? I signed a horse. I did sign the horse. You want me to sign the horse? I'm like, are you serious? She's like, yeah. So I signed the horse.
With a marker?
With a marker.
I'm trying to process that, man. Like, you signed a horse. First of all, you got to remember, there's a lady bringing a horse to a game, which is strange enough in itself. And then to say, hey, on top of that, can you sign my horse?
I know.
We got to find this lady, and I got to go through somewhere in Mannheim and go through the phone book and contact the Mannheim Eagles and be like, yeah, do you remember this fan who brought a horse to a game? And we have to ask her, first of all, why? And why did you get Jason to sign a horse? That's crazy. Nothing will beat that. I don't think any professional hockey player or professional athlete on the planet may have a story for an autograph signing of signing a horse. Nothing beats that. You win. 100% so. You win.
I've also signed a forehead. That was weird. Signing a forehead is weird, but a horse is way more strange and a little more.
Body parts are a little strange too, because obviously, a horse too, I would think it's going to come off, right? Yes. Like, my whole thing when I was a kid was I'd like to get this. I never sold anything that I've ever got an autograph of, because that was my moment with said player. I've signed jerseys, signed cards, whatever it happens to be, right? So it's always been strange to me, somebody who asked for a body part to get signed or a horse to get signed.
Nick, didn't you tell me that we kind of have a weird, strange connection? Because wasn't your first game like my first game?
It
Or
was
something like
your,
that?
it was one of, it was your first point. I thought it was your first game. You had your first game actually the day after you were traded against the Flyers, March 19th, 97. It was
Yeah.
April 2nd, 97. Actually, I have it right here. This was the little shirt that I got signed when I was just a little guy on April 2nd, 1997. And you see some signatures on there. Matt's is on there.
Gotcha.
Dmitry Yuskevich, Mike Craig, Rob Zettler, bunch of signatures on there. I guess we didn't cross paths because we were just waiting. My family and I were waiting on church on the east side of the building to meet whoever came by. But it's pretty cool that we do have that connection. I mentioned off the top of the episode that April 2nd, 97, the first goal I see in person, you set up Wendell Clark. That was your first point as a Toronto Maple Leaf. And here we are 23 plus years later talking about the Leafs and
That is so
meeting
amazing.
Wayne Gretzky and signing horses and all jerseys and all sorts of stuff. And it really has been awesome to have you on. Thank you for doing this, Jason. And while you're at it, please tell my viewers here about your amazing podcast, because you have some great guests on and some great conversations as well. Tell me and tell them where they can go if they want to listen and watch Up My Hockey.
Oh, I appreciate that. And first of all, Nick, I do appreciate you having me on and, caring enough to hear some stories. And I hope your listeners like them. There's always lessons, right? Is what I say, whether it was no games in the NHL or 1,000, there's things you can pick up and learn from for these younger athletes and even for fans too, to understand what it's like to navigate that space of hockey. I think it helps understanding the human side of it. But as far as me and following me, I'm really focusing. Well, one of my podcasts called Up My Hockey. It's about, it's about the guys and about the journey. As I just said, it's about allowing them to tell their story and talk about some of the challenges and some of the things that they either did well or didn't do well, and having human conversations about them, and not necessarily, where their favorite spot to eat on the road was. And there's nothing wrong with that question. But my podcast isn't really about that. It's more about what it took for them to do that and the mindset required to become a pro. So I love those conversations. It's really, the podcast is doing really great. It was nothing that I set out to be a podcast host, but I think the story and the conversations is compelling to people, and it's growing, and I'm getting a lot of good feedback about that. So that's a good resource to consume some content that might be new and a little different. But as far as me and supporting me, like I have a Facebook group that I've created an amazing resource for parents to handle hockey. Hockey's tough. It's a difficult place to navigate. I did it as an only child, and my parents weren't hockey people, and we did the best that we could. And you stub your toe a lot of the time along the way, and you're trying to do the best you can. And I just think now in this day and age, to be able to supply like one resource, one place to come in, to get support, to be supported, to bring the right experts in at the right time to support the players, and to grow a community is really important. So I talk a lot about, the mindset side of the game, beliefs and mental toughness and confidence. And that's where I speak to my truths and my experiences. And like I said, I do bring other people in who are experts in different parts of their fields, and really supply this kind of a training ground and community for parents to come together. So that's what I'm really proud of. That's where I spend a lot of my time. And then also with my private clients, just helping guys get to where they want to go. I think that's something that I really wish that I had. And I know it's beneficial for some players to have that trusted, confidant, that support cast that can help you through some things and give you some tools to put in your toolbox, so you're ready when the SHIT sometimes hits the fan. Because it inevitably will come at some point. It's the mark for a lot of these players is how you handle that scenario and that event, right, and how you get through it. So yeah, no, thanks for that opportunity to talk about those things. I'm on Instagram at Jason Podollan if people want to follow me there. And that's really where I'm most active. And then on Facebook at Up My Hockey. So that's where you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. And you can see the links to both Facebook and his Instagram account right there at the bottom of the page. And Jason, it's wonderful work that you're doing, both with the podcast. Your stories are amazing. For those who haven't listened, he's interviews with Chris Osgood and Nick Anderpov and Bruce Boudreau and Todd Warner, who has been on this show as well. Some great, wonderful stories. And hey, you should get into radio and TV as well, because you are a wonderful storyteller, Jason. And I look forward to many more episodes. And also great work that you're doing, providing that backbone and helping players with the mental stability and the psychological human side of the game. I myself, when I become a hockey parent, I've had those talks with my fiance. We've talked about, coaching and, how we're going to get them into the game, or if they want to get into the game and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully down the road we can be in touch again, and maybe I can count on you to help me out when I'm a crazy hockey dad trying to deal with it all.
100%, man. And that's the thing. We don't have to do it alone. I think that's the best part about this day and age. And even you and I, like you mentioned it earlier, right? It's you're not victim to your association or to your neighborhood or to your team coach. You know what I mean? Like, there are people out there that want to help, that can help. And you should look for help. I mean, that's part of any type of high performer, right? Like, has a group, a team around them to help them, and that's really what I'm trying to provide is that team for parents to clear the clouds, get rid of the fog, have a resource, have some place to talk and communicate, and not feel like you're just going through this thing and not knowing or guessing. Right. So anyways, people are needed. I think that's been the theme of this. And that's kind of the theme of what Up My Hockey is about, is that use the people that are around you, help each other, support each other. And you're going to have better results, and you're going to enjoy the process a heck of a lot more too.
Yep. Talking about things and the power of positivity, huge, and not just in sport, but in life in general. Awesome message. Definitely. I think it's a great message to end on, Jason. And again, give them a follow, listen to the podcast. If you're out in the BC area and want some help with, I guess, anything hockey related, go to Jason as well. And Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this episode.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to Nick for sharing that episode with me. One, having me on as a guest, obviously appreciative. Anytime somebody reaches out and wants to talk to you is something to be grateful for, that somebody's interested enough in your story that they want to share it with others. And I'm grateful to Nick for, saying, hey man, take this episode and please use it. Let people listen to it. So thank you to Nick. Thank you for you guys listening. And also, I hope you all recognize that, I'm going to be transparent with this. That's a bit vulnerable for me to do that. I was hesitant. A big part of me didn't want to release an episode about myself. I didn't want it to appear pretentious or narcissistic, but I felt that, it's relevant and it's real and it's the truth. And it's one of the big reasons why you are listening to me right now, wherever you're listening to me. Because if those stories didn't happen, if my journey through hockey didn't go the way it went, there's a very, very high probability that I wouldn't be here behind this microphone right now. So for you to understand that and to have a little bit of an idea about me and my reflection of my career and what hockey meant to me and the challenges and the adversities and how I handled them and what I did well and what I didn't do well matters, I think, for the context of what Up My Hockey is and what my hockey is about. So yeah, be easy on me. It wasn't necessarily about me. It was more for anyone who cares enough about this episode to know that, there is a person named Jason that's behind this. And the reason why we're here is because of those stories. So that's my story. I hope you guys did enjoy it. And we have a great lineup coming up. So next on the list is Ken Reed from Sportsnet, co-anchor of Sportsnet, also author. He's written quite a few books, one of which I was just in the last one. So we're going to talk about One to Remember, which was his most recent book, and about some other amazing hockey stories that he has. And following Ken Reed is none other than first ballot Hockey Hall of Famer, most recently, Jerome McGinley. So we're going to have my ex-World Junior teammate on to talk on Up My Hockey as well. So we have a couple fantastic guests coming up I'm really excited about. And that's it for this week. So until next time, play hard and keep your head up.
Just watch me.